Hello guys, welcome to the part 2 of our last story. Let's get started our story. Another group of people, at least a dozen, but heading in another direction, roaming. Gangs of sleep-deprived sick people. God knows how this thing affected them long term. When my parents were done discussing, they sat me down to explain that we were going to stay indoors and keep away from the windows just in case we were. Locking all doors and windows, closing all curtains, and not playing anything louder than necessary. We were to draw as little attention as possible. Of course I agreed. What choice did I have that night? I could tell things were deteriorating. Dad almost took a double dose of booster shots as he forgot he'd taken the first one, but Mom stopped them. There were no phone calls coming and they'd stopped checking in on us. Mom even tried calling, but the line had been disconnected. The gunfire outside was further away but more frequent. We could hear cars honking but no sirens. Then there were fires, at least 2 somewhere downtown. We could see the smokestacks from afar. Mom wasn't doing well. She couldn't eat and at times she could barely stay on her feet. She kept talking out loud. Even if no one was in the room with her, she had to lean against things to stay upright. She couldn't keep the fiber bars down and she walked around with her head bobbing back and forth. Dad tried his best to keep her active, but he was having trouble as well. No matter how many cold splashes he took to the face, he just couldn't stay attentive. I wasn't doing well either, but nowhere near as bad. I still had my appetite. I took my booster shots, but I could feel the side effects. My hands kept shaking and I had a nasty headache. There were these pinches down my neck like someone was shocking me with a wet battery. I'd imagine things moving just outside my vision. I kept turning around to look at the windows as I'd start to hallucinate that there were screens. By morning there was a new problem. Both the power and the water had been cut. There was a small lake a short walk from the house and we had no choice but to try and get some water by hand. We had some drinking water stocked in the kitchen, but we needed some for the bathroom. Mom volunteered to go, but that was out of the question. She could barely stand or make a coherent sentence. There was no discussion. Dad had to do it. We watched him from one of the upstairs windows. The sun had just risen, bathing the withering landscape in long sharp shadows and a sickly bright glow. Mom was just staring blankly ahead as if trying to remember what was so important. Isn't it your birthday soon? She said out loud. That was Tuesday. I responded. Did you wish for you to get older? She asked. I wish for that. I want you to be able to get older. She looked at me and laughed manically. She blinked one eye at a time, her left eye lingering a little longer than her right. Her eyes were sunken and dark and she kept giving me cross eyes. I think she meant well, but that look she gave me was nothing short of terrifying. It was like she'd been reduced to her most basic self. My mom was still in there somewhere, but most of it was just gone. After about an hour I spotted Dad coming back. Mom and I were both relieved, but it didn't last long. I noticed he wasn't carrying any water. Moments later I could see he wasn't alone. There were about 2 dozen more people coming with him. Mom didn't seem to react. She just looked out the window and nodded to herself. For a moment she was almost falling asleep, standing up, her mouth moving up and down on its own like a bass out of water. I could see something moving in her throat. I shook her and in a moment of clarity she looked out the window again as I heard something pound against the door downstairs. Mom pushed me into the closet. She ran downstairs to get the remaining booster shots and dropped it all on me along with a rich watch and a couple of fiber bars. Someone will get you, she said. Just wait and stay awake. I'll try to think of something. I didn't have the time to protest. Before she slammed the closet shut, I could hear a key slide into the lock downstairs. Dad may have forgotten something about who he was, but he hadn't forgotten how to use the house keys. I just sat there in the dark listening. I curled up into a ball. I didn't want to get too comfortable. I could hear furniture being turned over, unfamiliar voices yelling obscenities or incoherent nonsense. A fight broke out and I Could hear someone throwing something. Another person ran up the stairs and into the bathroom, repeatedly kicking the bathtub. A woman screamed, then a man. There was a gunshot followed by windows being broken. I could hear a muffled scream as if someone was held down, maybe like they did with the old man outside the night before. I must have sat there for hours in the dark. It was hard to tell if my eyes were open or not. I couldn't tell if I was really hearing something outside or if I was just imagining it. I could hear voices and whispers, but they didn't seem to make sense. Sometimes I imagined them standing just outside my door asking me for the cheat codes for the games I played. All I had to keep my waning sanity company was my mom's wristwatch, and I could barely make it out. Time passed so strangely. I could be wrapped in a thought for what felt like hours, but only minutes passed. Then I would catch myself staring straight ahead, and 2 hours could disappear. I kept repeating the next scheduled hour for the booster shot like a mantra, but things were getting stranger. The clock would go backwards at an imag, and someone sitting across from me, a pair of white eyes staring back at me from the dark. There were little voices telling me to go to sleep, and I found myself nodding off. I could feel something moving in me like a hand trying to fit into a glove. I finally gave up and got out of the closet. I could barely stand as I dragged the booster shots and fiber bars along in a plastic bag. I didn't care if there was anyone downstairs. I needed to see something. I needed light or some kind of stimuli. The whole house was trash, every piece of furniture broken, every light smashed. There was blood splatter on the walls, and the front door was hanging on a single hinge. Every window was smashed, and our picture frames had been thrown across the room like ninja stars. But the strangest thing was in ACD smell coming from the kitchen. At first I didn't understand what it was. It looked like a person, but there was something wrong with the limbs. After a few seconds of adjustment and trying to force myself to clarity, I realized it was a dead body. A young man with a knife sticking out of his chest sped out on the kitchen floor. His jaw was extended and broken on one side. There was a black and blue arm reaching out of his throat, reaching upwards to grab his own head. Something in me stirred. Something in me didn't like what I was looking at, and I wasn't sure if it was me or something else. I tried to push it down with a fiber bar, which strangely worked. I made my way outside in a daze. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to find my parents, and another part of me wanted to just get out of town. I wanted to look for a bike or just start walking or catch a bus. Of course, there were no buses to catch, but my sleep-deprived mind couldn't separate fact from fiction anymore. That entire night was one long, living nightmare. I kept imagining things coming out of the dark. I could hear voices telling me to turn around, to stop, to run, all at once and none at all. I could barely keep my balance, and stopping even for a moment would send me straight to sleep. I had to keep going. I even took an extra booster shot, which just gave me this sharp joint pain and made me sweat. I could tell I'd done something stupid. I took a shortcut through the park. I could see faces coming out of the trees. I saw a man lying face down on a gravel path, being pulled forward by an arm coming out of his mouth. I saw a man out by the lake, repeatedly slapping his arms against the cold water surface, like a manic child trying to get as high a splash as possible. Some of it was real, some of it wasn't. I couldn't tell which was which, not anymore. When I finally reached downtown, I saw at least 24 people gathered outside a burning building, all of them with black and blue arms reaching out of their mouths, stretching towards the flames as if slowly wafting air towards them like human kelp moving against an invisible current. They leaned back and forth in unison, praising whatever chaos they had caused without a word or sound, and yet I could hear them welcoming me, beckoning me. All voices unique, carried to me by an unfelt wind. Come closer, begged. You belong here. I turned away, and the voices grew louder, desperate, screeching, demanding my attention, my devotion. Some of them coming from outside, some of them coming from the rumble of my stomach. It's already here, I laughed. It'll never go away, it'll never sleep, it'll never stop. Hands reached for me, a face in every window, voices reaching from beneath the concrete, gunfire, broken windows, glass cracking under my rubber boots as I shuffled past burned-out cars. It was dark then, bright then, dark again, and at some point I succumbed. I felt concrete against my cheek, but I couldn't bring myself to get up. My legs wouldn't move, my eyes wouldn't open. Yes, the voices laughed, come to us, come burn with us. And then darkness. I don't know how long I was out, hours, maybe half a day. I woke up to see a man running towards me, asking me if I was okay. A car had pulled over, bathing me in warm light by the side of the road. A colony of frogs looked at me in the distance. My eyes landed on a discolored sunflower. It turned blue. Strange how you don't notice the most obvious changes until they stare at you in the face. Turns out exposure had happened at least 6 hours earlier than the man with the clipboard had predicted, and I'd been awake long enough for most of the effect to pass through my system. I was found unconscious by the slide of the highway about 9 miles from my house. While I did have an uncomfortable, dreamless sleep, the effects it had on me were nowhere near as bad as what happened to most of the neighborhood. I'm sure you've heard of it. Riots, they called it. Just another mess up in a low-income area. I don't even think it reached national news. Some of the people who succumbed to it early had permanent brain damage. Larry Peterson was never the same, but it was hard to tell if it was because of the emotional trauma or the sleep thing. Either way, he had to have a nurse come look after him for a few weeks for the rest of his life. Mom and Dad weren't completely unharmed. Med either. Mom developed some kind of narcolepsy after that night, spontaneously nodding off at the most inopportune times. Dad lost his sense of taste and smell. To this day, they're having a hard time explaining what exactly they experienced. To them, it was just like going to sleep and having the most horrible nightmare, only to wake up in a hospital bed. Sometimes I wonder if I did fall asleep. Some of the things I saw were so strange that there was no way to tell me if they real or not. I vividly remember that scene of hands waving back and forth outside that burning building downtown. It had to be real. That building did burn, as you might imagine. I have a hard time looking back at this, thinking too much about it gives me this icy feeling in the pit of my stomach, like a small part of me believes that this was all just a big nightmare, that I'm just still like clocks tick away from waking up in that closet with someone standing just outside waiting for me. Or maybe it's something inside of me still waiting to grab the resins. Maybe it's just a night away. That's enough for today, guys. We meet in another new horror and creepy story. Until, like and subscribe to our channel. Bye guys.